So, everybody wants to talk about the new Napoleon movie. Shh. Sorry. Well, I want to tell you about the ordinary men that fought in these wars. But I never thought for a second that I'd find a story about a woman from Manchester cross-dressing as a man to fight Napoleon. Shh, shh. Sorry.
Oh, the grand old Duke of York, he had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill and he marched them down again.
Well, it would appear that the grand old Duke of York only had 9,999 men, because one of them was a woman. This is the story of Sarah Roberts Taylor, a woman from Manchester who fought Napoleon under the command of the grand old Duke of York in the uniform of the 15th Light Dragoons and later the 37th or Hampshire Regiment of Foot. People have been disguising themselves as the opposite sex to get in and out of wars for a long, long time. Epipole of Charistus was a Greek woman who dressed as a soldier to fight in the Trojan War, and Achilles dressed as a woman to avoid participation in the Trojan War. The most famous, of course, would be Joan of Arc in the 15th century. Hannah Snell was the most famous cross-dressing British soldier. She donned a soldier's uniform to fight against Bonnie Prince Charlie. And that's another one. He dressed as a maidservant to escape the Battle of Culloden in 1746.
So, I'm afraid you've been living under a rock if you haven't heard the word trans yet. But was Sarah Roberts Taylor trans? Or was she just trying to do her patriotic duty and prevented from doing it because of her sex?
Her story starts out as you would imagine. Sarah Roberts was a tomboy.
Let's go swimming in the rock. Sure. What's the matter? Ain't you going in? You never want to go in the sun. Afraid you get your feet wet. Attention. I'm the general around here, and we're not going in swimming. Okay, boys, let's make them. Oh, leave me alone, Jamie! Oh, Jamie!
The information about Sarah Roberts Taylor came from the most unlikely of places. The archives of Ontario in Toronto, Canada. Somebody had a keen interest in the British military, especially things of a Napoleonic nature. He or she kept a large scrapbook of newspaper clippings from 1800 to 1820. The dates and the newspapers they came from are not recorded. However, the article on Sarah Roberts Taylor has a handwritten note saying it is reprinted from an original that appeared in the Manchester Herald and has the date December 1814. These are the only records we can find on Sarah Roberts Taylor. We don't know if she had any siblings, but it appears if she did, there probably weren't any brothers, as she was the child enlisted to help her father, William Roberts, who was a bricklayer. A bricklayer's apprentice is an unlikely job for a young girl in the 18th century. In 1778, France and Britain were at it again, and 14-year-old Sarah thought it was time to answer the call. This was around the same time that Napoleon Bonaparte himself was enrolling in military school. But unlike Napoleon, Sarah was tall for her age. Her young age, height, and one would assume the lack of having to go through some sort of nude physical might explain how she passed muster. She used her father's name to enlist, and for 2 months she learned the skills of her trade, the rough riding master declaring her the best rider in the squad. She tells the newspaper it's due to her being used to mount undaunted to the top of high buildings when attending her father. She attained the rank of sergeant and stayed with the 15th Light Dragoons for an amazing 21 years. Somehow she managed to keep her sex a secret. Perhaps the extra care she took in guarding her secret had good effect and produced the regularity and orderly conduct which recommended the pretended William Roberts to the favor and protection of the officers and procured her promotion. The reporter tells us that in the course of her military career, she visited many distant parts of the globe, fought in the Duke of York's Flanders campaign, received several wounds which, however, were not severe and were in parts of the body that did not betray her sex. A scar from a saber graces her head, and the mark where a musket ball was extracted from her leg are honorable testimonials of her service. In 1800, after 21 years with the 15th Light Dragoons, she was discharged. She decided to transfer to the 37th Regiment of Foot. On the island of St. Vincent's in the West Indies, she contracted yellow fever. She thought she was going to die, and requiring attention that would expose her sex, she confided in the wife of a sergeant. She surprisingly recovered, and no longer having even a nominal claim to manhood, she resumed life as a woman. Sarah longed for a return to military life, and as she could no longer be a soldier herself, she married one. In May 1801, she became the wife of a private in the 37th Foot by the name of Taylor. In 1812, the regiment was moved to Gibraltar, and Sarah and her husband were captured and spent 2 years in a French prison. In July 1814, there was a prisoner exchange. Sarah and her husband returned to England. On the day of the interview, she is a widow with 3 children, living with her parents in Lee Street, Newton Lane. She works with her aged mother, employed in washing linen. Still anxious, she says, to follow a camp as the most pleasant life of which she can conceive. Sarah submitted a request for the pension allowed to soldiers for long and faithful services, as well as the arrears of her husband's pay, which had accumulated whilst he was in the French prison. The author of the article concludes, "And sure we are that we shall be joined in the wish by all ranks of society that the service of the so-called William Roberts may be remunerated in a pension to Sarah Taylor." There's still much to learn about Sarah Roberts Taylor's life. Did she receive her pension? It appears that Hannah Snell was honorably discharged and granted a pension in 1750. In searching the name Sarah Taylor, I came across a curious article about the Peterloo Massacre. One Sarah Taylor was under the hustings and saw John Ashton, who carried the Saddleworth flag, sabred and trampled. He died 2 days later. It's the same time period and the same town. Could this be the same Sarah Taylor? Another irony of this situation, the infamous soldiers at Peterloo, who didn't hesitate to use their swords, were none other than the 15th Hussars, Sarah Roberts Taylor's old comrades.